All right, I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Harold Tuchfeld, and he'll be speaking on the rise of Rome in Judea, 161 to 37 BCE. The floor is yours, Harold.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And I see so many open eyes there, and I hope that I'll be successful enough that I'll see a bunch of open eyes at the end. So I'm going to give a presentation on the rise of Rome in Judea, 161 to 37 BCE. It's history laden in the beginning, and then I talk about numismatics. You'll see lots of coins, maybe 100 coins, although only one of them do I own. Because the ones I have are not necessarily as high a quality as some of the photos of CNG and other places. And so first, talk about the history, and please indulge me in that. And that's important in then understanding the coinage. And the coinage is very important in understanding the history. Coinage from this period and throughout history have reflected what the authorities have tried to provide as messages and also as propaganda. And the coins show the culture of the times. And to make sure that everyone is happy with this presentation, I even included a token. So goal of this presentation is to try to answer the following questions on the rise of Rome during this period. I call this talk the Jesus prequel and also the real Hanukkah story. So the questions that I try to answer in this presentation through the history discussion and the coins: how did Rome gain influence in Judea in the first place? How is this friendship between the rulers of Judea and the Romans mutually beneficial? And then how did this friendship and influence turn to Roman control towards the end of this period? And what is the numismatic record of this period and why is it important? So let's start with Judea just prior to contact with the Romans. So Judea is an area that was under self-rule within the Seleucid Empire. Seleucid Empire was a Hellenistic state, in other words, a Greek, a Macedonian ruled state, ruled by a general of Alexander the Great after Alexander the Great died, called the Hellenistic state. And he started the Seleucid dynasty, which ran from 312 BCE to 63 BCE. BCE means before Common Era, used to be, and it's basically the same as BC. So the Seleucid Empire was a center of Greek culture in the Middle East, and Greek populations from the cities of Greece also became the elite in this area, including local elite also. Seleucus, the first Nicator, and Nicator in Greek means the victorious one, was a general of Alexander the Great. He founded this empire following a division of Alexander's empire. And here in the upper right, we see a Greek statue of Seleucus I, pretty fearsome looking. And this statue was found in Herculaneum in Italy, which is near Pompeii, and it was also buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Judea was part of the Ptolemaic Egyptian Empire. Ptolemy was another general of Alexander the Great who ruled Egypt. And Antiochus III, also known as Antiochus the Great, conquered it in 200 BCE, conquered Judea, and it was incorporated within the Seleucid Empire. Flavius Josephus, who is a historian during the time of Jesus, actually, or just slightly afterwards, portrays Antiochus III as friendly towards the Jews of Judea and cognizant of their loyalty. So Here is tiny Judea, where my pointer is printing, within this vast Seleucid Empire, which at one point ran all the way from Afghanistan and all the way across Turkey, butting up against the Aegean. So Judea was faced with a lot of challenges due to, first, as they say in real estate, location, 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 coveted strategic location in the Middle East and a very fertile area, and a battleground between powerful neighbors, a unique religion, Judaism, which was a monotheistic religion, which was at variance with all the surrounding religions. There was disunity amongst the Jews, a lot of which had to do with how much culture to assimilate from the powerful neighbors and occupiers, such as the Seleucids. And also there's influence politically and economically of the diaspora Jews. Those are Jews that lived outside of Judea, and there was a really large community in Alexandria, Egypt, that was very, very powerful economically and politically important. And so they would provide funding for the temple, provide money for the temple. They also tend to be more Hellenized. In other words, they assimilated more of Greek culture into their life. So the next ruler was Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And here we have a beautiful coin of his. And actually, this is one I do have. It's the one coin I'm showing that I have. And a very beautiful tetradrachm, which is 4 drachma. And just a wonderful sculpture in metal of how beautiful the portrayals were at this time. So the disunity amongst the Jews made intervention by the next less benevolent Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Epiphanes meaning benevolent one, although some of his subjects kind of changed his name slightly in referring to him like Epiphanes, which means the mad one, since he was a little erratic. And he intervened on the part of the extreme Hellenists in Judea. And he was also taking steps to attain a more tightly controlled Judea before confronting Parthia, which were the Persians to the east. He went in, took down the walls of Jerusalem temple, seized the treasury, built a fortified citadel, put a statue of Zeus in the Jerusalem temple, and put in repressive edicts throughout the towns of Judea, including the right of observing of the Sabbath and the right of circumcision were banned. This led to the Maccabean revolt of 167 to 160 BCE. This was a successful revolt against Antiochus IV Epiphanes and the Hellenistic influence in Jewish life. And here is the area that the revolt was able to free and go back to self-rule within the Seleucid Empire. The revolt was led by the Maccabee family, an elderly priest named Matthias, who refused to worship the Greek gods. And he killed a Hellenized Jew who stepped forward to make a sacrifice in his place, and then killed the government official. Then he went back to his mountain stronghold, and revolt was carried out by his 5 sons, especially Judah. So this really started as a civil war against Hellenized Jews, but due to Antiochus's hard measures upon the Jews, it turned into a war of liberation, and it freed this area that you see here in green. The Jewish holiday of Hanukkah commemorates the cleansing and rededication of the temple in Jerusalem by Jewish forces in 165 to 164 BCE. However, the Seleucids went back in afterwards and took the area over. But eventually it was liberated, and this whole area was an area of self-rule by the Jews. Judah Maccabee assumed the leadership from his father. Great leader, military commander, led a predominantly guerrilla war. And he was killed at the Battle of Elasa in 160 BCE in fighting against Demetrius I, who was the ruler of the time of the Seleucid Empire. What you see up on the right is a woodcut portrait from 1553 on a book of biographies of important people, and in the shape of a medal. Now, Judah Maccabee probably looked nothing like this. This is more a representation of what kings looked like at this time in 1553. What we have in the bottom is a dram or drachm of Demetrius Soter, who Judah Maccabee fought against. Leadership then went to Jonathan and the Seleucid general Tryphon, who was a usurper, who took the throne away from the hereditary monarchy, tricked Jonathan into attending a friendly meeting, took him hostage and killed him. One of his daughters was the ancestress of the historian Josephus Flavius. Here again, another woodcut from 1553. And here we have a tetradrachm of Tryphon. Leadership then passed on to another brother of Judah Maccabee, Simon Thassi. He survived the battles against the Seleucid and founded the Jewish king's dynasty called the Hasmonean dynasty that ruled Judea, and was recognized as the ruler of Judea by the Seleucid king Demetrius II. He was then later murdered by his son-in-law Ptolemy. Here we have another woodcut from 1553, and here we have a tetradrachm of Demetrius II. The fourth son, we know very little about other than the way he died. In one of the battles, he saw a Seleucid war elephant that was decorated as if it carried the king. So he went underneath the elephant, stabbed the elephant then fell on him and he was crushed to death. And then another brother, John, also died. So we talked about how the Jews got self-rule, won it back under the Maccabees. Well, how did they protect this hard-fought self-rule from the Seleucids? Well, that's where the Romans come in. A treaty of friendship between the Maccabees and the Senate of the Roman Republic was promulgated in 161 BCE. This was at a time when Rome's power and influence was growing in the Hellenistic world and starting to clash with the Seleucids. And in fact, the Romans defeated King Antiochus III in Battle of Magnesia, which was in Turkey as the Seleucids were moving north. And then Antiochus IV Epiphanes was humiliated by the Romans. King Antiochus IV Epiphanes tried to invade Egypt in 168 BCE. And outside of Alexandria, there was an elderly Roman senator with a cane. He basically confronted Antiochus IV and said, "You must leave. Your troops must leave Egypt." And Antiochus IV started hemming and hawing and said, "Well, I've got to speak to my council, can't withdraw." And at that point, this elderly Roman senator with his cane drew a circle around King Antiochus IV in the sand and said, "You need to make a decision now, or you're at war with Rome if you come outside the circle and don't agree to withdraw." And withdraw he did. So now, what records do we have of this Roman-Jewish friendship treaty? Well, there were no Roman coins known to have commemorated this treaty. At the time, there were Roman moneyers that filled this role for a certain period of time. And here is a typical Roman denarius, which was a silver coin of about 3/4 of an inch diameter, with a typical one where you have a god here or representation of Roma, and then a chariot on the other side. And the Jews didn't issue coins at this time. So how do we know about this treaty? Well, it's mentioned in a book called 1 Maccabees, written in Hebrew by a Jewish author during the second part of the 2nd century BCE. However, there are no Hebrew versions that exist still. They were all lost. The only surviving version is in a Greek translation called the Septuagint. And in this letter of Aristeas, written in the 2nd century BCE, it talks about the Greek translation of in essence, the Torah, with a couple of books added, like the books of Maccabee, known as the Septuagint. And the myth of how that translation took place is the great librarian Alexandria, the Crete librarian, went to the king Ptolemy II of Egypt, said, we really need a translation of the Torah into Greek to add to our vast collection of books. And then an envoy was sent to the Jewish high priest in Jerusalem, who chose 6 men from 12 tribes, totaling 72. They went to Egypt, Alexandria, 72 translators completed the task in 72 days, and they were all identical. Very nice myth, but probably not correct. More likely, the Jews of Alexandria wanted a Torah in Greek as their holy book to use. And over 20 Greek manuscript letters, copies of this letter of Aristeas exist. And here's a copy of a part of the Septuagint. So let's now talk about the evolving relationship of the Jews and the Romans, and then we'll get to the numismatics. So the Hasmonean dynasty was established by Simon Thassi, one of the Maccabee brothers. Dynasty lasted about 100 years under 8 rulers. First, it was self-ruled semi-autonomously within the Seleucid Empire. Then when the Seleucid Empire was disintegrating, it became independent and expanded into neighboring regions, and then under Roman control, 63 to 37 BCE. So the rulers are depicted here, and this is important as we get into the coins. So Simon Thassi was the founder of this. His eldest son, John Hyrcanus I, ruled as head of a council, never said he was king, and he greatly enlarged Judea through conquest. And then Aristobulus I, after John Hyrcanus passed away, ruled. He ruled for about two years, and he ensured the safety of his rule by jailing all his brothers, except for one that he killed, putting his mother in prison and starving her to death. Upon his death, Alexander Jannaeus became king. He was a pretty cruel and oppressive guy, and his rule of about 30 years was characterized by civil war and wars of expansion. And then Salome Alexander ruled as a queen, his wife, and she was also the wife of Aristobulus I, and when he died, Alexander Jannaeus married her. And she ruled for a number of years. And then she designated Hyrcanus II, her eldest son, to rule. And by the way, the first in this dynasty to say that they were actually king was Aristobulus I. So Hyrcanus II was designated the ruler, but that didn't sit well with his younger brother, Aristobulus II. And then the last ruler is Antigonus, who is the son of Aristobulus II. So at the height of the kingdom, the original area was here that the Maccabees had liberated, and then through wars of expansion, it became this much larger area and included Idumea, which I'll speak to a little later. So again, this relationship was very mutually beneficial. For Judea, Rome provided protection against the Seleucids. For Rome, it provided an ally against the Seleucids. And it only started turning bad for Judea once the Romans started conquering the Seleucid Empire, including Syria, by the famous Roman general Gnaeus Pompey. And in fact, the Romans intervened several times to help the Judeans. I won't go into it in any detail for time's sake. And then in many monarchies, the descendants aren't as far thinking as the fathers or the grandfathers. And this was the case here. Be careful what you wish for, John Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. So John Hyrcanus II, eldest son of Alexander Dineas, designated by his mother to rule. But he wasn't the swiftest of thinkers. He wasn't very energetic, but his younger brother certainly was, Aristobulus II, and he thought he should rule. The two brothers fought a civil war. And then here is the problem. Be careful what you wish for. They both appealed to the Romans for help in around 63 BCE, at the time that the Romans were starting to conquer parts of the Seleucid Empire. They appealed to Marcus Scaurus, a deputy of General Pompey. And both of these Judean brothers lavished gifts and tried to bribe Scaurus to win him over. So first, Pompey intervened and supported Aristobulus II, and Scaurus, who was his deputy, defeated King Aretas of the nearby Nabatea, and who was supporting Hyrcanus II. And the Romans then made it into a vassal state, that being Nabatea. And then they thought, you know what? Why are we supporting Hyrcanus II? We can control him much easier. Why are we supporting Aristobulus II? He's harder to control. Hyrcanus II is much easier. So they switched sides. And Pompey restored Hyrcanus II as the high priest. Pompey defeated the Aristobulus's army in multiple battles and took him and his sons prisoners. So Pompey enters Jerusalem. Rome, at this point, annexes the kingdom, but then lets Hyrcanus II as a ruler with conditions. So Aristobulus II escaped in 57 BCE, instigating another rebellion put down by Mark Antony, a Roman cavalry commander. Aristobulus II was captured again. But then in 49 to 45 BC, the Roman Civil War, Julius Caesar fighting against the forces of Pompey. So Caesar released Aristobulus II in order to turn Judea against Pompey. But Aristobulus II was poisoned by a Pompey supporter before getting back to Judea. Then 48 BC, in this civil war, Pompey was murdered. John Hyrcanus and Antipater, the Idumean, who was the father of King Herod, was the prime minister that the Romans insisted that John Hyrcanus have, and basically was, kind of ruling Judea. 44 BCE, Caesar's murdered. And what we have on the right is a beautiful denarius of Julius Caesar. And the Romans were pretty good at depicting what their rulers actually looked like. But in this case, we believe there is a little bit of alteration. According to the Roman historian Suetonius, Julius Caesar was balding on top, and he was extremely sensitive about it. And that's why he always wore this, laureate on top. But if you look at this coin, you see some abundant hair on top here. So this was a little bit of image promotion. And just in case you're interested in this coin, this sold in a auction in January 2021 for $20,000. So after Caesar was murdered, Octavian, who later became Caesar Augustus, Mark Antony, and Lepidus formed the triumvirate to fight against the murderers of Julius Caesar. And Hyrcanus is restored to the throne, and Antigonus, the son of Aristobulus II, escaped and led a rebellion against Rome with the help of the Parthians, who were the Persians, who were the dreaded enemy of the Romans. And the people are actually sensitive and kind of liked Antigonus because Antony and Cleopatra had led a life of a lot of luxury and financed it through taxation of the people, which included Judea. The Roman Senate nominated Herod, the king, the son of Antipater, as the new king of Judea and the friend of the Roman people. But he had to battle, Herod had to battle Antigonus to rule. Antigonus was defeated by Herod, backed by the Romans, was taken to Antioch and executed by the Romans. Now, originally he was supposed to go back to Rome, but Herod wanted no part of it because he didn't trust Antigonus. Maybe he might turn things around in Rome. So he was executed in Antioch, Syria, by the Romans. And here we have a woodcut from 1704 showing the death of Antigonus by beheading. Last part of the history section, King Herod. So after the Hasmonean dynasty ended with Antigonus, King Herod ruled with a rather mixed record. He ruled as a Roman client king. He reported to the Romans and he established his own dynasty. And here again, we have a 17th century print showing King Herod, which I'm sure again looks nothing like what he really looked like. So the positive of King Herod is he built a lot. Lavish, large industrial and building projects. He rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem. If you go to Israel, you can see the Western Wall, which is part of that. That is remains from Herod's temple. He built Masada and several other fortresses. And he also used the latest technology in like underwater hydraulic cement to build a harder at Caesarea. Here we see on the right a model of what this ancient port looked like. On the left, we have an aerial view of Masada. So the downside of Herod was he was a pretty cruel and jealous guy. He executed John Hyrcanus II. His wife, Miriam, was a Hasmonean princess, executed her brother who was the high priest, and executed his mother-in-law, Miriam's mother. That's why Caesar Augustus was reported to have said, better to be Herod's pig than a son. Meaning, okay, a pig, it's not kosher. Herod's not going to touch it. But a son, okay, we can slash, we can stab, we can burn. And according to the Gospel of Matthew, it was Herod that ordered the execution of male children 2 years old and under in the vicinity of Bethlehem upon hearing prophecy about Jesus. So let's talk now about the numismatics. Start with Hasmonean coinage and then Roman coinage of the period. So why did the Hasmonean kings issue coins? First, to improve commerce, also to proclaim the newly won power and sovereignty, and to show the power, basically, of the kings. They issued mostly small bronze coins that were less than an inch in diameter, called prutas, and then half prutas, also known as mites or leptons. No silver or gold coins were issued. And the rulers that issued these coins were Hyrcanus I, Aristobulus I, and Alexander Jannaeus and Antigonus. And those names are the Greek names. The in parentheses are the Jewish names. So what would one expect to see on these Hasmonean coins? First, according to Jewish law at the time, no images of humans or animals, so no graven images. Second, certain symbols, the double cornucopia, that kind of looks like this that I'm pointing to with my pointer. And in the center is a pomegranate or a poppy. And that's a source of debate. Is it a pomegranate? Is it a poppy? Or some coins pomegranates and some are poppies? Still under debate. And then on the left side, you'll see an inscription. And this is not in modern Hebrew. A modern Hebrew reader cannot read this. This is Paleo-Hebrew, closer to Aramaic. And then there are certain common themes. There's the anchor. Now, what's interesting about the anchor is it was a Seleucid symbol of power and perhaps naval power. And the Jews of Judea adopted it. Also, the lily of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was known for its lilies. So that's what we see here. Also, this kind of sundial was also a Seleucid symbol of power. So a pruta. So say 2,000 years ago, you have a pruta. What can you buy? Well, a pruta can get you 1 pomegranate. But you're really hungry. You want a loaf of bread. 10 prutas. So here we have the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet in green and the modern Hebrew alphabet in blue. And you can see how different the Paleo-Hebrew is. And what makes these translations of these legends, inscriptions, so difficult is that the Paleo-Hebrew is not even consistently written. It's written in a number of different ways. And given how old these coins are and how they wear, it's really difficult to translate. I've never successfully translated one. I've tried a number of times. But here is a translation. Here's a coin of Judah Aristobulus I. And basically the inscription says, Judah, the priest, the high council of Jews. And Alexander Jannaeus, a very similar inscription. And here we see the Paleo-Hebrew. So Hasmonean coins of interest. So here is an early John Hyrcanus I pruta. Again, these are all bronze coins. And what's interesting here is you see the lily of Jerusalem on the left, On the right, we see the anchor. Now, Judea was under self-rule, but ruled by the Seleucid Empire. And so you have in Greek, running up from the left side of the anchor, Antiochus. So it's kind of written by both. And you can say that this symbol was a symbol of this anchor, a symbol of the Seleucids and the Jews later. The first Hasmonean king that issued a coin. Here on the right, we have a double pruta of John Hyrcanus I. Now, there's almost an identical coin that was issued by the Seleucids. And what we see on the right is a Macedonian helmet. And again, the rulers of the empire that broke up, Alexander's empire that broke up, were all ruled by Macedonian generals. And hence the Macedonian helmet. And here we have a double cornucopia, but a slightly different configuration. Here is the very famous coin, the anchor, sun, wheel, pruta design of Alexander Jannaeus. And a lepton, or smaller version of this, is famously known. This coin is generally known as the widow's mite, from the story of when Jesus and his disciples were watching coins and money being donated to the temple. And he observed that that he appreciates more the few mites of a widow over the abundance in silver of some of the wealthier residents. On the right is a very famous coin of Antigonus, known as the menorah coin. So Antigonus, again, was fighting against Herod to be ruler of Judea, fighting against Herod and the Romans. So this coin may have been part of the propaganda that he put forth. He had a menorah on the right, kind of saying that, hey, I'm the Jewish legitimate ruler. Herod, he's an Idumean, although his family had adopted Judaism. And then on the left is a bread table. So in case you're interested in trying to find a coin like this, it went in an auction in 2020 for $71,000. These are very rare. Now, for the token collectors, here we have a lead pruta, or token, of Alexander Jannaeus. Generally, the design is not really well done, because lead is very soft and it's hard to get a good design on it. And this could be the first Jewish token. And it may have been redeemable for food and other gifts, given away as a token. And hey, you can redeem it for food or gifts. Here we see the upside down anchor here. What's interesting about the Hasmonean coins is that the depictions on them were then adopted by Israel. So here we see the double cornucopia on the left on a Hasmonean coin. Here we see the double cornucopia on a 2 new shekel coin from 1985 to date. And what looks like a pomegranate in the middle. Also, we see the anchor. And then in the 1 pruta coin from 1950 to 59, here's the anchor, modern Israeli coin. And then we also have the famous menorah coin. And here on a modern 10 agora coin from Israel, depiction of the actual menorah coin. So now going to Herod. So Herod was very sensitive about his image and about trying to show that he's a continuation of the Hasmoneans. So here is a pruta, a bronze pruta, showing the upside down anchor and the cornucopia, although they have a caduceus in the middle, rather than a pomegranate or a poppy. And then here's a really cool coin to the right. And this coin is a prutode coin. And on the right, you see a helmet with the cheek guards surmounted by a star. So this is really, really, really cool coin. So now let's look at the Roman coins of the period. So the Romans celebrated victories. They may have been a republic at the time, but they were a republic bent on expansion. They were a militaristic republic. They celebrated victories. And here, Marcus Scaurus, who was involved in the fight against John Hyrcanus and then later Aristobulus II. Here we have on one side, we have the Nabatean king Aretas in a supplicating position and making an offering to the Roman next to his camel. And this was when Scaurus and Publius Hypsis were moneyers. And then the other side of this is Hypsis' side, where he has this chariot. So one thought was that they were running again for office, and Scaurus is saying, "Hey, remember me? I beat King Aretas into submission." And then Hypsis says, "Hey, remember me? I'm the one who put on these really good games that the populace enjoyed." This coin is from 58 BCE. Coin to the right is a coin celebrating the victory over Aristobulus II by A. Plautius, who was the moneyer at the time. Now, the design is very similar to the Scaurus Hypsis design, with a king in a supplicating position making an offering. In this case, it's believed to be Aristobulus II. And the inscription is Judaea, and then Bacchus. And to this day, academics are still wondering, what does Bacchus mean? One thought was, well, I think one thought, and most popular thought, is really just refers to Aristobulus II. Another thought was, well, maybe the Romans didn't really understand Judaism. Like they observed some Jewish traditions, a lot of ceremonies. There's a drinking of wine, and they thought, okay, I guess the Jewish king, he likes wine. Well, our Bacchus likes wine. Our god Bacchus. So academics are still not sure what this truly means. One other coin celebrates the conquest and of Jerusalem and the victory against Antigonus. This one is so rare, I have never seen it at an auction. Rarity level RRR. Basically, Mark Antony's head on one side to the left, and then two naked Jewish captives seated, against the, looks like the standard in the trophy or standard in the middle. So conclusions and references. In conclusion, the friendship between Rome and Judea was mutually beneficial The Jews in the beginning got protection against the Seleucids. Rome got an ally against the Seleucids. But Roman interests turned imperialistic as they were conquering the Seleucid Empire, and Judea was strategically located between Syria and Egypt. The Hasmonean dynastic struggle between Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II provided the opening for Rome in 63 BCE to take control of Judea. But even if there were no dynastic struggle, Judea would eventually be within the imperialistic ambitions of Rome. Numismatic record, this important Roman-Jewish treaty, there's no numismatic verification of this in coinage. Hasmonean coins, mostly small bronze prutas and tiny half prutas. No silver or gold coins issued during this time. Coins were issued by Hyrcanus I, Aristobulus I, Alexander Jannaeus, and Antigonus. And the Romans issued coins celebrating victories against King Aretas, the ally of John Hyrcanus II, against Aristobulus II and Antigonus. I've also included a bibliography here at the end. And thank you very, very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, do we have any questions?
Yeah, were the coins normally used as in commerce, or were there other purposes?
Yes, they were primarily used in commerce. For most things, except for the higher denomination items in which probably Roman coins would have been used, silver or gold coins. But for everyday things, the prutas were used.
Other questions?
I have a quick question. Thank you, Harold. For those of us who are totally unfamiliar with this topic, this is a sort of an eye opener. I appreciate very much your tour, if you will, or your effort in presenting this. I have a quick question. I went to Israel once, and I went to Jerusalem, and on the outskirts of the city, there were folks selling Roman coins from the times of Jesus, left and right. Crazy number at very high prices. And I learned later on that those were a lot of fake coins. And so there are two things to me is how complicated is this market because of the coinage that is basically fake coins. Like the Mexican market at this point in time is going through a process of it. There's a lot of Chinese-made Mexican coins that look very good, and they can deceive you. And the second question that I have is, how did the Roman deal with mint? Where were these coins minted? I mean, were they minted elsewhere and then brought to Judea or to the area, or what was the mechanism here where they were minting these coins and taking them over to be used in commerce, as it was brought up just a few seconds ago? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your comments. So let me answer the second question first. The coins were minted in Jerusalem. And when you look at the Judean coins from this period relative to the Roman coins, the Judean coins were much cruder. The designs weren't as sophisticated as coins from other areas, from Rome and from some of the other major cities in the Roman Empire. Now, in terms of buying coins on Dizengoff Street in Jerusalem, these prutas are not rare. They're like pennies. And you just need to know who you're buying from. Be careful. I would buy from an established dealer, but these prutas you can buy from this period, which is the time of Jesus, pretty much. They were in circulation. You can buy a really nice one for, you can buy a cruder one for like $20 and you can spend maybe $100, but they're not. So anywhere from $20 to $100 based on condition.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
So
can I add something to that?
Sure.
Couple things. Technically, you cannot bring anything out of Israel without import permit from the Israel Antiquities Authority. So if you're dealing with anybody in Israel, they should have that authority. You can buy a lot of illegal stuff. You can try to sneak it out. You may or you may not get caught. But a lot of the high-end things, there are a lot of fakes. There's a ton of the stuff available here in the country. Again, go with a reputable dealer. David Hendon, who wrote the book on Guide to Biblical Coins, is a fabulous book. He also wrote a book called Not Kosher, and it shows all sorts of fakes and things of how people have imitated things. And I'll show my menorah coin. There are a ton of those that are fake that even fool some of the experts as well. So it helps knowing what dealer you're dealing with. But if you're in Israel, number one, you need to have something that actually has a permit, or you're just kind of risking getting a fake. And there are lots of them out there, and there's some really good fakes too, and there's some really bad fakes. So which makes it kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, let me show you something else in terms of coins and how much they cost. I go back to the presentation. Let's see, where'd my presentation go?
I think I just need to hit the arrow back, and then you were at the end of the presentation, so you need to just hit the left arrow, so to speak.
Oh, there it is. Okay, now. So when I go, so this coin here, I think you can get something in the $100, $200 range. It's not rare. This again in the $20 to $100 range. And then on the Roman coin side, this coin is, maybe $100 to $300. A really nice copy. And Charlie, I think, is an expert on helmets and probably on this coin here. I think this one is more on the order of $400 to $500.
Yeah, I'll show one in a minute.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
So in terms of the rarity of these particular coins, so like the menorah coin, is that a product of a very short time period in which it might have been minted compared to the so-called widow mites? Was it a denomination that was particularly high value, and so not many would have been in circulation? Do you have a feel for those differences?
Let me try to answer, and then I'd like to defer to Charlie.
Okay.
So my first comment is supply and demand. So supply was probably small because it was a limited period in which it was minted. And demand is high because there's a menorah on it.
Right.
People like coins with menorahs. So I think that might be one of the factors. Charlie, you probably know a lot more about that coin.
There are probably 20 to 40 probably real menorah coins, and they are quite pricey. If there are maybe 20 or 40 American colonial coins, that'll go for far more than these menorah coins. Antigonus was only a ruler from 40 to 37 BC. He didn't have a very long production capacity, and he made a 2 pruta and a 1 pruta, I think a half pruta coins that are more common, which more often used. I think the menorah coin was kind of a last ditch effort to try to gather support for his cause. So there just weren't a lot of them made. So there really aren't many that exist. There are probably 10 times as many counterfeits, if not more, available. But it's just there aren't many, probably because they didn't make a whole lot in his short reign.
Yeah.
And the widow's mites, there are hundreds of thousands of them that were made. The period lasted from 134 from Hyrcanus I all the way through Janaeus in about 60 BC, and there are tons of them. So there's not one widow's mite. There are probably a number of different ones, and they got cruder and cruder as they progress. But there are boatloads of those, and they were used quite often in commerce. And you can buy that. That's why you can buy them. They're really worn, so it's kind of hard to get one in really good condition, superb condition. But there are a lot of them out there at a very affordable price.
Hey,
Remember the one I bought? I bought a few from a friend who is a dealer, John Jensick.
Mhm.
He had a bag of about 200 of them.
Yeah.
He just let me choose out of it.
hey guys, I've owned a couple of coins that were called widow mites. Are those, do they counterfeit those ones like that are common? I mean, I assume they were real and authentic, but I don't know if the tourists want them because of the biblical reference, and there might be a market for them if they counterfeit them.
There are bags full of those things. There are piles of them stacked all over that are real. So I'm not sure there's real market for counterfeiting them. I suppose there could be, but I think most of them are probably real. You can get them for 10 or 20 bucks, sometimes. So I'm not sure there's much, profit in, trying to counterfeit those low items. They counterfeit the more rare coins and
Right.
make a lot more money off of them.
I would just add a note here about the counterfeiting of these. Often counterfeits enter the market that were never intended to sell to collectors even. They were intended just for public distribution. They have been used as promotionals in mailings, slapped onto advertising cards, produced by the hundreds of thousands, counterfeit widow's mites. You can buy an entire sheet if you go looking for them of coins of ancient Israel, and they're all fakes. They're all cast copies. They're just produced there for the design, and the whole works is sold as a souvenir sheet with the coins glued on it. And so these things are coming from everywhere. And meanwhile, there are literally hundreds of thousands of perfectly authentic ones also working their way into the market from the finds that continue to be uncovered every single year. So it's, this would be like somebody's trying to sell US 1 cent pieces 1,000 years later, when it turns out that every American house that was buried in the rubble whenever the end came had 200 of them buried in the drawers and bottles all over the place. And then someone starts producing counterfeits to give away as promotional items. So it's, you simply have to have an idea who you're dealing with or what you're doing, because the quantity of both real and fake is astronomical.
Good point. Thanks.
Other questions?
Oh, one other thing, I ended mine with King Herod. But what's really cool is with ancients, like you can buy a Pontius Pilate coin, pruta, as an example, things from the New Testament. It's really kind of cool, all the stuff you read about. The coins were issued.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Thank you, Harold. That was actually a very fascinating talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.